Hello everyone, my name is Brian Bazalar and welcome to my presentation, Job Stressors and Burnout, Race, Age, and Gender in the Human Services Fields. So stress is common in every field. Because it is so common, it is naturally accepted as part of the working world. Companies and institutions are realizing that unregulated stress has consequences. An article by Garrett Evans and his associates state that the child care industry faced high staff turnover in 2003, and that caused a staff shortage. As you can imagine, within childcare, you just can't afford lack of staff. It raises stress, and then further staff suffers from those consequences. This is one example of employees in human services reacting to stress. Past studies tell us that, past studies make the assumption that the employees within a company or within an institution, that they all share similar traits. And while there is some truth to that, we can't overlook the differences within a diverse group that make up, let's say, the library or other human services fields. So multiple studies in human services workplaces have concluded that job stressors can lead to burnout. And as the studies continued, they discovered that factors such as age, race, and gender, those are things to consider when you're thinking about the larger scheme of what causes stress and how employees are affected by such stress. This project will analyze the results of the recent studies and determine how race, age, and gender affect job stressors in the workplace. The goal is to lessen burnout among these groups. And considering that this is a library sciences and information project, it will be any and all experiments, or rather studies, will take place within the public library setting. So the burning question is, well, why is any of this talk of stress among gender and race and age populations, how is that relevant to library sciences? Well, a study by Linden et al. States that most empirical evidence points to the conclusion that modern public librarians are frequently exposed to chronic work stressors. And stressors lead to burnout. Burnout leads to job turnover, lack of staff. If modern librarians are exposed to job stressors, as the author before had claimed, then it is in the best interest of libraries to identify staff at risk for burnout before it begins affecting the workplace. And there are more effects to being stressed and to being burned out than just simply leaving your job. In fact, a lot of the toll it takes on the workplace happens because you are still at the environment while you're burned out and while you're stressed. Leader and Maslach are some of the foremost heads of this stress research, and they had said if such early indicators were indeed valid predictors of future problems without burnout, then they should be used to identify high-risk people who could be targeted for early preventative interventions. The reason it's so crucial to catch employees who are at risk of burnout is because of such effects as exhaustion, cynicism, and low professional efficacy. This can display itself in the workplace in many ways. Cynicism towards the people you work with, in the librarians, case towards the patrons, any animosity, or downright disdain for such people. That could be a result of burnout and of job stressors. Emotional exhaustion is just not having the strength to continue with your work. And once again, you can see in librarians who have just been through it, how crucial it is to sort of support them before it gets too far. And for all the studies that exist on job stressors, they do not take into account the growing diversity within fields as often as they should. So studies of job stressors and job burnout within public librarianship and academic librarianship, while those do exist, they reflect a more generalized population of employees, and it may not be the best representation of, in this case, librarianship going forward, because the workplace is getting more diverse, and job stressors can affect people, new people coming into this field, as they do bring their own backgrounds and they do bring their own perspectives, so it's important to consider them as well. Now, the goals of this project are to survey the specific demographic among public librarians in a library system, compare results to studies done in other human service fields, and provide an outline of what demographic is most vulnerable to job stressors, burnout, and why. So studies on stress among differing ages, genders, and races, those studies do exist in other fields such as child care, police work, nursing, teaching, and the idea is to compare their results to the results that are taken from this library study. Some results amongst those studies, or rather amongst each other, do share similarities in what's causing stress, how people are reacting to stress, and some surprisingly do not. It would be interesting and helpful to see where these similarities are shared between librarianship and other human service fields. Job stressors that may be affected by gender, race, or age include harassment, discrimination, job satisfaction, job security, and job expectation. As you might guess, some factors affect different parts of those key concepts in different ways. For instance, gender and race may play more of a role within harassment and discrimination than job security or job satisfaction, which is not to say that they don't have a role at all in those. However, age may have a larger say in job satisfaction and job security than the others, and vice versa. Where there is missing information within this field of study, as I had mentioned before, while there are studies in other human services fields on job stress, and even job stress in relation to gender, race, and age, it is surprisingly absent within librarianship, which is a huge problem. Getting back to the one of the initial articles I was citing, librarians do face a large amount of stress, and the institution of librarianship can benefit so much from having this information as to what's causing stress and burnout within their communities and what can be done to repair that. This information is also scarce for academic libraries. Again, there are studies for academic librarianship as to the causes of stress, but not specifically among differing ages, genders, and races. So to conclude, there are negative relationships between job stressors and certain employee demographics. However, there are also positive relationships between these two factors. While I've been speaking primarily negatively of the relationship between job stress and new incoming populations of employees within the library sector. There are actual positives as to how these employees react and what it is they are asking of the library environment. And there's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot to bring into the environment. The making of anti-harassment discrimination policies has actually been very effective in making employees feel more supported against job stressors. And strong future enforcement of those policies can make for a more welcoming and comforting environment for everyone involved. Future research that students should be taking or other researchers should be doing, we definitely should be focusing on representation, studying the hiring practices of libraries, public libraries, how these available positions are promoted within the public library. So whether it's intentional or not, bias or discriminatory practices can affect community, fairness, and values, which have been known to be one of the main reacting causes of job stressors. So it is very important that the library going forward focus on how its employees, or how the employees that they bring in initially, or from the beginning of the hiring process, how these employees will reflect a new library community, because that does affect stress. So are these fair hiring practices happening? Are they not? It's something that we should dive into in the future. So there is a current gap in studies of job stressors in public libraries and reactions to job stressors between diverse groups of people. It is this gap in knowledge that inspired the project, with the goal of filling in that gap. Hopefully future research can jump off of any information that was collected in this study. That concludes the presentation, and thank you very much.